I've been working with MOBI really since I joined DLT Labs last year, but DLT Labs has been a member of MOBI for a number of years. So we're very passionate and committed to the development of blockchain standards and want to share what we've been up to, because I think large scale production deployments are few and far between right now. I think it's fair to say. So really interested in all the questions and conversation that we're going to have this morning. So I'm going to set the stage for everyone today with respect to a little bit of background. I won't spend too much time on who we are and what we're up to, but I want to spend the majority of time diving into the learnings that we've gained through this implementation that we have with Walmart and getting everyone really comfortable with the application. I do believe that the challenges that we solved for Walmart are industry agnostic, has definitely been validated through some of the conversations that we've had with the MOBI supply chain working group. So I will do my best as we go through to extrapolate the learnings from Walmart, but also share where I see applicability within the automotive sector as well. So just a really quick introduction on who we are. We've really been in stealth mode as an organization, but in the last 2 years have been focused on enterprise and production deployments of blockchain technology. Some of our founders are the earliest members in the technology, going back about 8 years. So we've got a long history of working with the technology and are really advancing the adoption and growth of the platform through working with partners, getting lots of great accolades and recognition based on the fact that it's working and it's generating significant benefit. But we also continue to really be involved in advancing the thought leadership around the technology through the different industry forums and groups, working with Hyperledger, working with MOBI, working with different organizations globally. So it's important that we participate at that level, obviously, as well. So if I set the stage, and hopefully this is somewhat familiar to each of you that have joined today, but when I think about supply chain and the complexity that exists globally, so again, whether it's automotive and you're talking about parts or demand orders, whether you're in retail and you're talking about the transportation of goods across the country or across the world, there are many participants in the supply chain that need to work together, and there's a lot of data that needs to be managed, often the same amount of data for different participants. And it is literally a web that is very difficult to manage. And I think everyone would agree we would all benefit if more of that data was centralized and being shared amongst participants, and ideally in real time, to aid the flow of goods and to aid the relationships that are needed between stakeholders in order to get those goods moving across the world. So what we've seen are the benefits for distributed ledger technology is that it really allows everyone to connect all of the data that's necessary in a trusted and immutable way, really providing that underpinning of commercial trust so that all organizations can work together. We like to say companies are meant to work together, but systems are not. So you probably all have some good examples of where you've seen that in your day-to-day lives. So the attributes that I believe are really important around the technology and that have come to life, and we're going to demonstrate through an example with the implementation with Walmart how this has been proven out. But distributed ledger technology has 3 attributes that I believe and that DLT Labs believes when deployed simultaneously create a tremendous amount of value for all participants in the ecosystem, and it is a huge differentiator when compared to more traditional technologies that might only offer one of these elements. So what are those? The ability for multiple parties, organizations, usually people that companies are meant to be connecting with in order to complete business workflows, when they're working together to share information in real time, that all of a sudden can start, eliminating the discrepancies and the disagreements that can exist because each organization has their own data silo, their own version of the truth that they're working against. Leveraging smart contracts in addition to that data really allows for everyone to be on the same page. So, imagine a contract, imagine your organization having a contract with a supplier as an example, and how can you answer the question, is that agreement being followed all day, every day as intended? It's really difficult to be able to respond to that truly with a huge degree of accuracy and confidence. But blockchain is a really great infrastructure to be able to automate that and provide that visibility and assurance. And then last but not least, the tamper-proof nature of the ledger and the ability to point to data when it's been updated or changed. Again, in addition to leveraging smart contracts and sharing data in real time, means that you can automate workflow and really start to address and remove process that are related to compliance. So again, these three elements in tandem are really at the backbone of what we've delivered for Walmart. And I'm gonna take you through an example, the example, and also the results, because I think it's important to ground it in the reality of what it's accomplished. Our platform, again, just a little bit about what we've developed, is a series of interoperable modules really focused around the traditional business outcomes that we've seen companies really benefiting from when they think about distributed ledger technology. So the key here is all of our modules are built. When we deployed with Walmart, we configured their solution in a little over 60 days and went into a production pilot with their largest carrier. Walmart is a very rigorous and notoriously known organization for compliance and security reviews. I think we were up to 9 of them that we passed as we were rolling this out. But being able to do deployment at this scale in 90 days is unusual, and it speaks to the already built nature of our technology. And it integrates into all of the Walmart legacy systems so that very much they're operating our platform in behind all of their already existing investment and tools that they're utilizing. So let's get into a little bit more of the specifics about what was the challenge that was being faced by Walmart. And again, I'll ask you to think about the sharing of data, again, whether it is working with an OEM and a tiered supplier, whether it is invoices around freight and the transportation of goods. This is data that needs to be shared between multiple parties. And so I do truly believe that this is industry agnostic and is a great example of how the ecosystem on the ledger creates a ton of value for the participants that are joining. So what are some of the challenges in freight transportation? And again, I've seen this now in agriculture, in retail, in consumer packaged goods and manufacturing. It really shows up pretty much all over the place. But freight transportation is a fairly fragmented process. And this is really due to the fact that there are many known charges, there are many known data elements at the beginning of a request to ship goods. That's referred to as the tender. You know the origin and destination. You know how many miles or kilometers that load needs to take. You know what type of vehicle equipment is needed in order to service that load. So that's great. All of that information is known, but when the goods are being transported, there's a lot of events that can happen. There can be delays at customs. There can be delays when you need to offload the goods at its destination. There can be off-route miles. There can be changes in the equipment type. What happens through the course of a delivery is variable, and this is very common in the industry. And these variable events create additional charges referred to as accessorial charges. And what happens then, both parties end up with an initial agreement on what was going to be charged for the service, and then a final invoice, which is often different from what was expected. And these discrepancies, while they are very explainable, are difficult to prove because both parties are working off of their own data sets. The carrier has one version of what they are claiming happened, and the shipper, rightfully so, because the invoice is different, is questioning, please support these additional charges because I was not expecting them. So what's been reported in the industry, and FreightWaves has done some good, has published some great articles around this, but upwards of 70% of invoices in this space, again, industry agnostic, but in general around the transportation of goods, end up in some form of dispute or disagreement or validation. There's a lot of different words that get used for the process because of these variances that happen during delivery. And that's tying up over $140 billion daily, specifically in North America, as a result of the needing to reconcile and validate the information. So what is this resulting in? It's resulting in carriers not getting paid on time, uh, invoices being delayed, interest charges accruing, and a ton of manual processes. Not to mention, what I've seen through talking to customers is, approval thresholds, a willingness to say, I will pay that invoice if it's over by up to, let's say, $25, $100, just because it's easier to overpay that invoice by a marginal amount than it is to figure out why it's different. So it's creating overpayments, errors, issues. We've definitely seen evidence of that. And the high admin cost of chasing these answers down has really resulted in a whole industry. Gartner has a whole magic quadrant dedicated to freight audit and payment providers whose existence is to facilitate payment, but also to deal with the invoice reconciliation and validation of these invoices, simply because it's very complex. It's that web of information that I shared in the beginning. And definitely Walmart was in that bucket where they were using a third-party business process outsourcer to manage the process for them. So that can be very costly. So these are the typical challenges, again, just based on the nature of the transportation industry, but I've definitely seen this through our conversations with the supply chain group at MOBI, being evident in automotive as well as, Walmart's experience in the retail sector. So we've had the great pleasure of working alongside the SVP Supply Chain and Logistics, John Bayless at Walmart Canada. I think one of the things that's really unique about this project is that it was a business-led project. And this has been deployed now on scale. We are rolled out nationally to Walmart's network of about 65 to 70 carriers that fluctuates based on who they're doing business with. As of this morning, we are approaching 200,000 invoices on the platform, with a number of carriers that are individually well over the 20,000 mark. So if there are goods being shipped to Walmart or being picked up by Walmart from their vendors, all of that information and data is flowing through our platform as it stands today. So this is just a different way to look at what I was describing. So the invoice in freight specifically, so this is getting into a little bit more of the detail around the solution, is really about how can you take information that exists between both parties and start putting it on the ledger at the beginning of the process. So what I mean by that is when Walmart issues a tender to a carrier, there are many, as I've mentioned, known charges and known data points about that invoice. And rather than in the traditional model where an invoice is generated by a carrier after the goods are delivered, and in some cases I've heard, up to 3 weeks after the fact, when the carrier gets around to submitting the invoice, that information is all happening once the transaction's already been completed. So what we've seen is by leveraging the ledger and keeping data for both parties centralized and referencing their agreed to contracts, you can actually start the creation of the invoice once the tender is issued. And so all of the information about where it's going, when it needs to be delivered, all of the details around the equipment type can all be populated. And I would estimate that 95% of the data that is needed to actually create an invoice and start the calculations for it are actually known right at that very point. Then through IoT and GPS data, you can in real time you can start calculating events. So if I use a specific example, let's say there is a delay at the border. You're waiting for goods to cross and that carrier is delayed for 6 hours. you can, as both parties agree to using IoT and GPS data, I think that's important that both parties have agreed to that. You can reference that event and automatically calculate and provide the history that that is an agreed to charge and it's a known event. So rather, again, you not waiting 3 weeks after the delivery to get an invoice and then say, hey, what happened here? I want support for that 6 hours. That is being calculated and presented on our platform in real time, and both parties can reference it. And it is an agreed upon data source with which the invoice will be eventually paid. And then once the goods are delivered, you've got, again, the benefit of the GPS and IoT data providing that, and you can start to automate and streamline proof of delivery as well. So super beneficial, but I think, just really good to ground everyone in the complexity of the invoice itself, and then how all of the massive amounts of data can be working together to create greater transparency. So an ecosystem is what has been created through the platform. Again, really industry agnostic, but you've got your shipping customers, any potential supplier or carriers, integration with all of the legacy systems. So you can imagine in a network of 65 carriers, all of the different TMS systems and ERP systems that exist, needing to be able to create a platform that can connect all of those, and then also contextualize all of the IoT and GPS messages from all of those different participants with the intent and purpose of calculating and creating these invoices. So, I would say one of my observations in working with customers in this space is the access and availability of the GPS and the IoT data is there, but the ability to take advantage of it and really understand how you can marry it with examples, contracts, and a specific process like invoicing is challenging. And a lot of organizations really struggle with how to take advantage of that data in an efficient and effective way, let alone make sure that you can share it with multiple parties as needed in your business process. So how is it working? So based on what I've described in the typical process, most organizations have an 11-step or thereabouts process around freight invoicing. And again, whether this is, a tiered supplier working with an OEM or in retail, you've got a request to pick up goods. You've got an agreement that needs to happen back and forth between the two parties that are going to, that are requesting that service and that are going to perform that service. And they go back and forth on data sharing in order to understand what's requested, what's happened, what should I get paid for? And then ultimately at the end of that 11 steps, the carrier finally gets paid. And many of the steps in this process are what I would consider to be non-value add. They are reconciliatory steps that happen because each party is working off of their own systems and their own data set. And that's, companies have gone through this for decades, and it has become, an accepted practice. But there is a different way and a better way to do it, and distributed ledger technology is really well suited for cutting out these steps. And I'm going to explain how that happens. So through our platform, what is different in this process and what Walmart and its carriers are benefiting from is those reconciliatory steps are removed. And from the point that the tender is issued, so step number 1, all of those known charges are entered into DL Freight, and the invoice is populated, and again, available for both parties in real time. As the transportation of goods happens, the IoT data is we're using that IoT data to automatically calculate any of those variable charges and provide visibility on those events that happen through the course of a delivery. We're also referencing all of those carrier agreements. So every carrier can have a different contracted rate and agreement. Again, you're not having to manually reference those. You can, in real time, validate those. You can validate the events and automatically calculate what's required based on those carrier agreements. So all of that is being updated in real time. So at the end of the process, the invoice can be automatically presented for the carrier to click submit. And in Walmart's case, because they've already agreed to the carrier contract, the use of the IoT data, when that invoice is complete, as the goods are being delivered, that invoice is complete, it's actually in an approved payment status from Walmart's perspective. So Walmart's not looking to do extra validation of that invoice. There definitely can be disputes that get raised. There still are. Less than 2% of their transactions right now are being raised for review, which is a huge improvement, pardon me, over the 70% that they were experiencing previously. But they can be surfaced in real time, again, versus waiting till, let's say 3 weeks after the fact when the carrier submits them. And they're more considered discrepancies. An example would be, let's say, an agreed upon rate for a order that's been picked up and delivered outside of the contract terms, a spot rate as it's referred to, comes up. That can be quickly addressed in the platform with that information being entered versus it really being treated like a dispute. And then we're connecting directly to Walmart's ERP system so that they can facilitate the payment of that invoice. Now, since there's no friction in the process, Walmart is able to offer quick pay and the ability to discount their freight invoice spend with their carriers for initiating payment within 7 to 10 days, which they weren't able to do previously, just given the complexity of the data reconciliation that was happening. So to put it more in terms of an invoice and what that looks like a little bit, I'm just going to move my little screen over here. What this looks like from an invoice standpoint is, on the platform, all of those known charges can be entered in at the point of tender. Everybody knows those. That's part of the contract. Then the variable charges that happen during the real-time monitoring or during the transportation can also be pulled in real time. So if I have that wait time, and let's say in this case it was half an hour, it's automatically populating, and we can reference the background IoT data. So that's easy to validate. And the subtotal and the details around the invoice and what needs to get paid, again, is available as soon as the goods are delivered. So this is a huge improvement for the carriers as well, because they no longer have to worry about creating invoices, following up and chasing payments. It's all available on the platform for them to be able to click submit on. Just to touch on that for a second, as you can imagine, in the network of carriers that any organization has, you're going to have carriers that are very sophisticated technologically, and some carriers that are very small. They might have less than 5 trucks. So for the implementation of this, we recognized that we had to be accessible, and this ecosystem had to be something that could accommodate those various types of companies and the vast array of systems and infrastructure that they had. So we created 3 different ways for carriers to integrate with us. In many cases, we're connecting through RESTful APIs behind their TMS systems, so connecting to all the data that they're already collecting and managing today. We can have a web portal for those that are less technologically sophisticated. And then if we need to, we've got less than 5% of carriers that are on EDI. So we're really big advocates of moving off of that legacy technology to benefit from more real-time forms of communication. So to give you sort of a sense of how the data flows more from a systems standpoint, what we have here is sort of what a typical environment, and very similar to what Walmart's environment was when we stand up a platform like DL Freight within a customer's ecosystem of partners. So we want to connect to the transportation management system, because that is the single source of truth, if you will, for all of the tender and contract information that usually exists between organizations for the shipment of goods. And all of the approval and acceptance of that information flows through the platform. Carriers, as I've mentioned, can connect with us in a few different ways, and they're going to be accessing DL Freight, or the information from DL Freight will be connecting directly to their systems, all around tender approval and the invoicing status, and also the invoice approval. In the case of Walmart, they were using Fourkites. Fourkites is a system that is collecting and consolidating all of the GPS and IoT messages from their network of carriers, but that's not a requirement. We can connect directly. It is really a customer's choice if they're already using an existing aggregator, or whether or not they're connecting to their partners directly. But that GPS and IoT data is a critical component to achieve the maximum amount of automation possible in this workflow. You could still have the process as I've described without the GPS and IoT data, but it admittedly would be more manual, particularly on the carrier side. Connecting to the ERP system. So in Walmart's case, it's SAP, to be able to provide the details around payment status and the physical payment of the invoice. And then the proof of delivery based on the end receiver. So in this case, it would be the Walmart's distribution center, and the accessorial information coming from the carrier organization, again, through the IoT data. So it kind of just gives you a very high level sense for how the systems are connecting in order to be able to accomplish this ecosystem. So what I think everyone is probably also most interested in understanding is, what has this accomplished? What has rolling out a ecosystem and platform for Walmart and its carriers been able to accomplish? So first and foremost, going back to John Bayless, I think the start of this being a business-driven project and wanting to address an issue it came out as a result of carrier feedback. Walmart was getting a ton of feedback on the dissatisfaction carriers had with the amount of time that it was taking for them to get paid, and the sheer cost of employing a third-party business process outsourcer to manage this process. And so the start of the project was really about addressing the tactical issue, if you will, of managing invoices in a more effective way for the betterment of Walmart and its carriers. How it's evolved and what's taken place is, and this is a quote from John, is really the creation of an information platform. Having data that can be shared in real time for Walmart and its carriers is really now surfacing a number of data points that the business can use in order to start having a different and more real-time view of what they can potentially change and tweak within their supply chain. So prior to the start of our engagement, as I mentioned, and very much in line with the industry, Walmart was having disputes at 70% of their invoices. Now, I get a lot of questions about, that's a big percentage. Again, disputes, discrepancies, what percentage of invoices are reviewed by, whether you have an internal team or a third party doing it. The answer to those questions can be different. But the reality is typically somebody within your organization or somebody you're partnering with to manage this process for you is looking at, if not 70%, 100% of your invoices to make sure that they are correct. And there are various thresholds. In Walmart's case, the threshold for approving invoices was very low. They are very rigorous, and they want to make sure that if they're paying an invoice, it is as expected. And so there was a lot of effort being put into making sure that that was the case, which was driving the 70%. What we've seen now with almost 200,000 invoices on the platform is that number has dropped to less than 2%. So that's the 97% reduction. And is a material game changer. It's virtually eliminated reconciliation from a process, and again, an industry agnostic process, which requires parties to go back and forth and agree to information that is really mostly known and can be answered by sharing that data in real time. And I would say referencing the carrier contracts or supplier contracts in this case to make sure that they're being executed as intended. Um, so huge cost savings, huge benefit to Walmart and its participants, the carriers, and clearly based on we should find out at 11 a.m. this morning. So very soon, I'm anxiously awaiting to hear if our solution with Walmart has been selected by the supply chain management professional management organization as the winner for this year. But even if it's not, the fact that it's being able to produce these results, leveraging a technology like blockchain is hugely impressive. So just to kind of reiterate some of the benefits, clearly eliminating reconciliation from the process, eliminating the business process outsourcer. There's a great interview with John Bayless on BNN where he calls it out directly. With this technology, they're now able to manage the process directly, eliminate that middle party, maintain carrier relationships directly, and do so at a significantly lesser cost. I would say as well on the carrier side, some of the questions that I get are around, well, Walmart's a big organization. They can make people get on board with a technology like this. And I do believe in enterprise deployments of blockchain, having a significant market leader that decides to go first is a big factor. It's an important element in getting the ball started, if you will. But it literally took about 5 minutes to convince carriers to get on board. And the reason for that is it benefits both parties. Uh, Picking a process within your organization or within parties that you work with, where leveraging distributed ledger technology is going to create clear and immediate benefit for both parties. You can point to a specific ROI that can be realized very quickly. Really helps speed adoption and reduce change management. That has been a big learning for us. And carriers realize that they get to benefit from eliminating the need to provide proof of delivery. In some cases, I've talked to customers who are still using carbon copies on documents in order to meet that requirement. And they are also, they can rely on when they're going to get paid. And they no longer have to deal with the administration of creating invoices and chasing invoices. So that creates a tremendous amount of value. And so, and I would say in addition to that, the integration as much as we can behind the scenes with their existing systems also means that the cost of implementation from a human capital standpoint is minimized as well. So tremendous value for carriers, very obvious and clear benefits for Walmart in terms of how they've been able to benefit. But I think, picking the process that was going to benefit both parties the most has really created a huge success story, and now it gets to evolve. So we're actively involved in the we call it the 2.0 discussions with Walmart and some of their larger carriers on how we can continue to grow this ecosystem and continue to leverage the distributed ledger for advancing more visibility around supply chain and automating more processes within their respective organizations. I'm just going to reiterate probably one other thing, and then looking forward to opening it up to questions from the group. But being able to demonstrate this in production as opposed to POC, again, was a huge accomplishment. Proof of concept initiatives are great, but often they happen in a sanitized environment that is not indicative of real life. It's not necessarily integrated with all the systems. You haven't tested the change management and the integration with your other parties that you are going to be deploying this with. So we were very adamant that, and so was actually Walmart, our chief strategy officer and executive vice president, Sergey Belyev, who was the CIO at Walmart when we deployed this, said if he was going to do this, and he was at Walmart at the time, then he wanted to do it in production. The rubber needs to hit the road, and you want to be able to show the results in real time. And being able to accomplish that in a little over 60 days, I think is a testament to not only Walmart, their commitment to the project, and DLT Labs and our platform, but it also is a really great example of how this technology can be utilized on at scale in production, without having to go through 18, 24 months of contemplation before you actually get to results. So just, I think a bit of a push that we'd like to see, and definitely as an organization we're advocating for, is more production pilot, less POC, so that the learnings can be clear and easily scaled when the results are accomplished. So we're excited to be advocates in that space. So Annabelle, I'm going to turn it over to you and see if, based on what I've shared there, if there's any questions. Happy to entertain them from the group.
Thanks, Shannon. Yeah, we just had one come in from Eric Palat. A very interesting presentation. On which blockchain have you built your solution?
Oh, excellent. So we on Hyperledger. So we did do some custom development around some of the elements of the protocol in order to make sure that it was going to be suitable and secure and stable for a production deployment at this scale. And there will be a white paper that's been co-authored by us and Walmart for Hyperledger that will be out, I would say, in the next week or 10 days if you're interested in more information about how we did that. But hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, just looking at what you've put together as a network, you've simplified the process overall, but with the data you're capturing, have you automated, I'll call it, vendor ratings from this on the analytics side now that you have, I'll call it, better data, it looks like? That's my guess.
Yeah, 100%. So, so specifically on the Walmart side, they're using the information now to rate vendors, negotiate contracts, optimize their origin destination pairs, really surfacing a lot of information that they have a smart transportation initiative that they're focused on, and this is all funneling into how they can continue to create efficiency within their supply chain.
Shannon, we have another question here. If you used Fabric, Hyperledger Fabric.
Could you repeat the question, Annabelle?
Sorry, another comment here from Dan. Hyperledger has over a dozen projects. Which was used? Fabric, question mark?
Yes, Hyperledger Fabric, correct.
Any other questions?
Yes, one more question, actually. You mentioned with Walmart, you're setting up this new network, if you will, this new system. You said there were many legacy apps that you had to integrate. What was the integration model or method you used for the legacy apps to interface this new network?
So predominantly it's through RESTful APIs to be able to benefit from, the maximum real-time communication between systems. In the case of the carriers, again, this was a Walmart requirement, but just to be transparent in their system, they already had set up the integration between their carriers with FourKites. Not required by, for us, but FourKites was already consolidating all the IoT and GPS data. Walmart had implemented that about a year before our arrival to answer the question, had the goods been delivered? So they were using that for better visibility around proof of delivery. So integrating through the carriers happens through FourKites, as well as either through their TMS system directly, again, through API, or through our web portal. So in some cases, carriers that don't have the sophistication around API are accessing the real-time details about the invoice and viewing the GPS data through our portal.
Okay, so as part of that access to legacy systems, Did you use the built-in Fabric certificate management and membership services providers? Did you use, I'll call it LDAP from Walmart as an interface for identity, or did you use a third-party solution like Indy?
So I'll have to take that one offline. I didn't have anybody here from the technical team to answer that, but Annabelle, if we can capture that question, I'm happy to follow up with more details. There's a number of different connectors that we've built that are part of our own IP, but I'd love to be able to get you a more direct answer to your question if that's okay.
Thank you.
Jim, I'll create an email chain so we can start that conversation. Shannon, I have another question from David Freeman. What is the approximate ROI for Walmart and carriers, and where do the savings come from? I'm assuming it's high since it is business driven.
Yeah, great question. So we can't tell you exactly what Walmart saved. That's confidential information from them. But so where the savings have come from, so the ROI was honestly realized very early in the project because the reconciliatory steps were eliminated. So utilizing Bison Transport, their largest carrier, as part of the production pilot. Bison, with over 20,000 invoices processed right now, and they're on a webinar with us tomorrow to speak about this. They literally have 0 disputes. Rod Hendrickson, who is their CFO, has specifically, said, my receivables I have no days outstanding in terms of my invoices now with Walmart. If all of my shippers were on this platform, I'd be a very happy man. So first and foremost, it's the reduction in the administrative effort. So first and foremost, the displacement of the business process outsourcer relationship. This was a large US organization that was providing service to Walmart. So that cost of that service was completely eliminated. As you can imagine, that would be a big ticket item. Eliminating any interest charges, those approval thresholds on invoices no longer exist. So that's a direct cost savings. And now being able to realize up to a 2% discount on freight spend for any of the carriers that are accepting quick pay is also another way to reduce expenses and generating savings. So those are some of the high level savings. There were definitely internal resources within Walmart that were working on this process, but what we saw specifically was it wasn't an exercise to reduce, the FTE, if you will, the full-time equivalent individuals. It was to take out those non-value add steps in the process and then move team resources to more value add activities. So there was a redeployment of people who were supporting this process internally at Walmart to other business functions. But the significant cost savings were the elimination of the BPO, the elimination of approval thresholds, interest charges, and the ability to discount their freight spend.
Thank you.
Great questions.
Anyone else want to jump in?
Perfect.
Okay. Shannon, thank you so much for a fantastic presentation, and congratulations on your Walmart Canada success story. I'm hoping you guys win the Innovation Award, so fingers crossed. As mentioned, the recording will be posted up on our website, dlt.mobi, in the coming week or two, so be sure to check it out. Until then, take care. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.